Welcome to Recalculating Small Business. Like its award-winning book, Recalculating is dedicated to small business in America. Don Mazzella is the editor-in-chief of the Small Business Digest. Recalculating, a program designed to help you be successful.
My co-host, Dan Perkins, is on assignment, but we have with us today someone I'm really looking forward to. He's a member of the Podcasters Hall of Fame. His name is Rob Greenlee, and is here to talk about why small businesses should look at podcasting as a marketing tool that they should do and as a way to getting their message across. Rob, welcome to the program.
It's great to be here, Donald. It's my honor to join you to talk about podcasting and the opportunity for small businesses, actually any size business, actually.
And that's true. But one thing we both agreed upon at a recent conference, eventually podcasting will outgrow over-the-air listenership. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Well,
I think so. I mean, I think in a lot of ways we're kind of in this middle ground between the digital world and the broadcast world as far as on the radio side. So I think audio is still it's still a little bit unsure how this is all going to play out and how long it's going to take. Radio certainly still has a strong audience out there in the world, and it's certainly an important medium for many people as they commute to work and in their daily lives today. But as we all know, the digital side has kind of taken over for a lot of the more traditional broadcasting mediums to some degree, like newspapers and a lot of TV and things like that are now consumed in more digital formats. And but it hasn't eliminated these other mediums like television or radio, obviously, but it's proven to be kind of supplemental and additive. But I do think that there is a significant trend line that's generationally around a shift towards more on-demand consumption of all media, which kind of puts radio at a little bit of a disadvantage, at least on the over-the-air linear side, where they play playlist type of orientation of linear content versus the listener being more in charge and more in control of their content experience. And I think that's a little bit of the shift that's happening, and I believe it's a generational shift.
Before we go any further, tell us about the companies you work for and their websites for our audience.
Yes, I'm the Vice President of Podcaster Relations for a company called VoxNest, and we own a couple of online properties. One's called Spreaker, which is basically a live streaming and on-demand podcasting distribution platform. It's also a listening platform as well. So we have our own listening apps out there. And then VoxNest is like a technology software company that basically creates other platforms and tools to enable people to create online audio programs like what you're experiencing here on Blog Talk Radio is actually part of VoxNest as well. So that's basically what we do. We enable content creators like Donald here to create programs online to create experiences with listeners on mobile devices and in mobile browsers and online in general, and to make a little bit of money from that and make a living at it and to create terrific and engaging programs.
It's an exciting time. I have a question. Vox, we're on Blog Talk Radio. We're also on 24/7 network. But is Blog Talk part of VoxNet, or do they just use you? Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, about a year ago, both Spreaker and Blog Talk Radio merged. So they were separate companies, and they merged together. The teams merged together. We merged technologies together. And so they're two separate platforms, and they're two separate kind of groups of content creators that use those platforms. But over time here, they're kind of blending together. Some of the Blog Talk Radio folks are starting to have their shows also over on Spreaker, and some of them are moving from Blog Talk Radio over to Spreaker as well, depending on what they're looking for as far as a technology solution for their program. So yeah, those two companies are owned by VoxNest, which is kind of the parent company is what I would call it.
Well, that's interesting. We've got to explore that further. But as you know, I know just enough IT to be dangerous, and the reason I like
well, me too. So I'm in the same boat.
But the reason I like Blog Talk, it's relatively simple for me to use, and then I have a great engineer editor who then comes in and papers over all my mistakes, and leaves me with a solid hour of, well, we seem to think it's a good radio, and our audience grows every month, so we must be doing something right. But but let me talk about something which someone said when we were having you on. You have to ask them, what is going on about how you measure programs? For instance, on 24/7, we have over 85,000 people who listen to our show at the time it's broadcast. We broadcast twice a week. Then, according to them, we also are on iHeart. We're also on Roku, and we're also on our own website. But none of this seems to generate any interest from advertisers because they say we're not measured. And can you talk a little bit about measurement and what's going on in this world?
Well, it's a very complex topic, especially when you're referring to kind of multiple platforms and multiple kind of listener experiences, especially online. I've been a content creator, a radio show host. I've been on broadcast radio. I've been on the XM Satellite Radio Network for a few years. I've been involved in streaming of my audio programs for many years as well. And then the whole download thing happened with podcasting. And so these platforms are very complex. They're very complicated, and each form of distribution has its own unique consumption patterns. And I think that we're still kind of in this refinement and development phase with media, especially online media, that has taken a long time to get defined and refined and clarified and standardized. And we're just not there yet. I think on the podcasting side, we've been working hard for many years, especially over the last 3 or 4 years, to come up with standard ways of counting audiences based on digital log file data, which is basically a digital record of the consumption patterns of the media files. So it's something that the industry, there are industry organizations that are working hard to standardize things, but you can have a standard, right, or an agreed to way of counting and reporting these metrics, but one of the secondary challenges is getting all the platforms to adhere and be certified to be supportive of those standards. And on the podcasting side, we're in the middle of doing that right now. We do have a standard through the IEB V2 kind of guidelines. Now that may be gobbledygook to a lot of your listeners, but what that means is that about 36 companies from the podcasting industry got together over the last 4 years to come up with a agreed to standard way of counting downloads and plays of audio podcasts in a very complex environment. And I think we've come up with it. And we're now in the process, and VoxNest is one of the companies that is going through the certification process right now of getting everybody on the same page. So when you're on any platform that's distributing podcasts, hopefully over the next couple of years, we'll all be reporting the same numbers in the same way. So that's the goal, and I think we're on that path. But it's been a bumpy one because people like to do their own thing out there with digital technology. That's where the innovation happens, and And people like to build businesses around this stuff. And sometimes when you have standards, it means that some people have to lower their numbers, and it changes business models. So it's a challenging process, but I believe that we're making progress on it.
Well, I for one, really looking forward to that, because
me too.
But now, let's go. Our audience made it. 59% of our audience in our surveys are presidents and/or owners of companies, and if they're like me, the older generation, not the younger generation, the idea of doing a podcast is frightening. And I tell you, it was frightening to me. And if you had ever told me that I'd be sitting in my office and I'd be doing a podcast, talking to people all over the world, I would have told you you're crazy. But be that as it may, I'm doing that. So now I'd like you, who are the expert in this, to say, what are the advantages to a small business of doing a podcast, and how can they do it in a way that makes sense?
I mean, it's a challenging question. And I think that one of the things, you raised this point that it can be scary doing this stuff, but I would raise the point that if you've ever done a live radio show in a radio station, that's even more nerve-wracking than doing a podcast. Because the whole thing with a podcast is that you can record it, and you can restart, or you can have a second chance. So in some ways, if you're doing a podcast, just relax, because you can always redo it. When you're on live radio, what is said is done. So I think we've kind of given ourselves a little bit of a break on that, somewhat, from the standpoint of the pressure of getting it perfect the first time. You can always re-record if you're not happy with it. So I think that's one advantage of podcasting, is that it is more of an on-demand medium. And there is live parts. I do 2 live podcasts myself, and I find the whole aspect of live really energetic and exciting, but it's also not for everyone. Sometimes we want to do editing and post-production, and we want to clean things up, as they say, and make things sound as good as possible. And that's one of the advantages of podcasting, is that it is more of a conversational medium, kind of like what we're doing right now. It's a little bit more relaxed. It basically allows people to let their hair down and talk about things in an authentic and real way. And I think it's a huge opportunity for, as we think of brands, to connect with audiences at a more authentic level. And I think more and more companies are wanting to create those type of relationships with their customers. And that's where podcasting really excels, is the ability to have almost like a friendship relationship with your customer, which is also a listener or an audience member of your program, that you're attempting to add value to their lives, and thus boosting the perception and relationship that you have as a company and a brand with that customer. So I think that's the real opportunity with it. And it's not as complicated as you think it is to get started or to do this. You just need to think about what you as a company and you as a brand means to your customers, and then also try and drive value, paint scenarios in your podcast, or create visions in your podcast, or things that you communicate in your show that are reflections of what your values are and what your brand values are and what the value of your products and services are, and then blend those two things together and make it relevant to your customer, which is what you have to do in your marketing anyway. Just translate it over to an audio program that you regularly put out and integrate in with your existing marketing program that you're doing with your customers. And I think that's the big picture, is how you think about the podcasting medium and how it might help you with your business.
We're talking with Rob Greenlee. He's with VoxNest, which, amongst other things, owns Blog Talk Radio and Spreaker. I have to tell you, Rob, we started out, when we first started this show, doing it live. and we quickly realized that ain't the way to go. And so both Dan Perkins and I are veterans. I have to tell you, I was a copy boy at NBC News more years than I care to remember, and grew up in television and radio and as a business. And I enjoy this podcast. It gives me a chance to talk to people from all over the world, from all walks of life, like yourself. But so we get on this program, we often get people, experts in the field, who have books out, and a lot of them are turning. We had one on last week, who turned his book into a podcast. Is that something that's happening more and more?
Yeah, I think that you can create an audio program. I mean, I think that there's two ends of the spectrum. I think you can create a podcast that talks about the genre or the overall topic of what your book is about, and then there's the other option of actually making a audio book, right? That can be a podcast. So it just depends on how you want to think about it. I know many book authors have read their books and created a chapter over chapter audio podcast as a supplement to their sales of their audiobook, or not the sales of the audiobook, but the sales of their physical book. And that's worked quite well. It's just because you create an audiobook version of your show doesn't mean that it's going to diminish the amount of book sales that you have, because sometimes people like to have both. And people will listen to a certain number of the chapters in your podcast and then go out and buy the book. So it's a terrific marketing method for book sales as well. But you can also look at it differently. You could look at it from the opportunity of, just like what you said, of having guest experts in the genre of your book to talk about bigger topics that are related to your book, but not specifically in your book. So there's a variety of ways that it can be positioned to help you market and get your brand as a book author out there as well.
Well, what are you seeing are the popular podcasts, the ones that generate lots of listeners? Is it science fiction? Is it health? What are the ones that seem to be growing at this point? Outside, we won't talk about politics. We'll leave that one aside. But outside of that.
Well, I think that you have to look at popular culture, news, sports, all of the areas where you see large groups of people that have an affinity around something, right? As popular genres in podcasting. I mean, politics is certainly one of them. Sports is another one. You can get as granular or broad as you want to. I would say that some of the more popular podcasts are usually linked up with some sort of a comedy. Those are usually the most popular shows are ones that have a certain amount of, I hate to say, but kind of entertainment value, maybe have deep contextual references to an area of popular culture or science or business that is relevant to large groups of people. And I think it's also the shows that are most popular have a certain amount of celebrity around them or popular culture popularity. So topics that are popping with large numbers of listeners today tend to be around topics that are top of mind with large groups of people. So, but personality and connection with audience and being engaging and building loyal followings and friendships with audiences and hosts is also a very popular method, which is different than a lot of other businesses or media, actually. I mean, this is a unique medium in how it connects with audiences. Television doesn't connect at the same level that podcasting does. Radio doesn't connect at the same level that podcasting does. So it is a distinct and unique medium, and you kind of have to think about it like that.
Well, on that level, tell us a little bit about your background. Our audience is curious. I've got an email across my desk about why you're in the Hall of Fame. So so please tell us, because I know you have a fascinating career.
Well, I started out just as a marketing guy. I got a marketing degree from college, like many other people have gotten, and had a fascination with media. And this was before the internet, and started when the internet started to emerge. I got involved in search engine marketing and using the internet as a marketing tool, and that brought me to a radio station in Seattle. This was back in 1999 approximately, and I walked into a radio station and said, "Are you doing any kind of a show on the growth and development of the internet and technology?" This was back during the middle of the .com expansion, and that was something that radio station wasn't doing at the time. And so I started doing a radio show basically back in that time frame, and started learning a lot about what was happening with the development of the internet and the web, and how media was getting extended over to that media more and more. So you can see kind of a natural evolution that happened with me as I dove deeper and deeper into that topic, how it impacted my thoughts around digital media distribution and creation back in those early days. I was on the radio, but I was creating a show that was getting recorded onto a cassette player or onto a cassette tape. I basically took that cassette tape home and played it into my computer on a $19 cassette player and created MP3 files. And that's where I kind of got started in all this. This was before podcasting. And most of the listening that was happening over streaming media technology at the time, Windows Media and Real Networks streaming technology. And so started building a show and started getting it out there, making it available as an MP3 download. And then slowly but surely built quite a following for my show, and actually got my show up on the XM Satellite Radio Network for 2 years, and built a distribution to 15 radio stations, and started being a content creator. And then that created a situation where I had my own co-located web servers at the time that were serving my website and my media files, because there weren't podcast hosting platforms like Spreaker around back then. So I kind of had to create my own distribution tools to reach listeners on the World Wide Web and the internet, and to enable downloads of MP3 files, which is now kind of taken for granted now is the way people get podcasts. But that's how I got started. And then I started helping others, and then doing search engine marketing and working for .com companies, and then slowly building my reputation as somebody that understood how to build a digital audience and how to distribute MP3 files online, and just how to do all this stuff, and just built a career that took me to a startup company in Seattle that was working with mobile phones with podcasting back in 2005, and then left there to go to work for Microsoft, and worked on the Zune podcasting platform for 6 years, and wound up working for Xbox and Windows Phone and those teams on making podcasts available. Even added podcasts to Windows Media Center for video podcasts back in the day. And then left there to go to work for a company called Podcast One. This was back in 2014 as their chief technology officer, and they were working with big podcasts back there out of Los Angeles, like the Adam Carolla podcast or the Steve Austin show, or some big sports podcasters out there. So I was working with celebrities and things like that, and then left there to go to work for Spreaker, and then thus now I'm working for VoxNest, and that's been like a 14-year career in helping others to do things in this medium. And all along I was doing podcasts myself. So for all of the companies that I was working for Microsoft and whatever, and I think that got some people's attention over the years, that I've been working in this medium for so long, and have built such a track record of working for big companies and small companies and startups, and I guess they felt like they needed to recognize that and put me into the Hall of Fame. So I'm I'm honored to be there.
Well, you should be. I have to tell you, when I've told various people that you were coming on the show, they said, "Oh, we got to make sure we hear it." You have quite a reputation. We're talking with Rob Greenlee. He's with VoxNest, but more importantly, he's one of the real pioneers in podcasting. We have a couple of minutes left, I think, Rob. The question always comes up: how do you measure the success or failure of your podcast if you're a small business?
Well, I would say that don't be that worried about your numbers, first of all, because when you start out as a podcaster, you're not going to have very big numbers. So don't get too caught up that your podcast isn't growing fast enough or your numbers aren't high enough, whatever. Really focus on the content that you're creating and how you're connecting even with the small numbers of listeners that you have, because that's what builds the foundation for future success, is that you have to really focus on adding value to people that are listening to you, no matter if it's 10 people or 10,000 people. That's what's going to keep them there. And if you stay, some shows will grow faster than others depending on the size of the market that you're trying to reach with the genre or the topic of your show. So success can mean a lot of different things. If you put it on the scale of how many times you get in front of a group of 100 people to present to them, like at a conference or something like that, let's say you get 100 listeners to your podcast. That's 100 people that are listening to what you have to say. So in some businesses, that can be significant depending on what your goals are. And I think that also gets back to, and what's your business model? What are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to sell services? Are you trying to become an expert? Are you trying to become a national celebrity? It really kind of gets back to what your background is, what your goals are, of whether or not you're a success and what you're doing with it. And sometimes it can take a long time to build quote-unquote success, really in business or in a podcast. So I just wouldn't be too hard on yourself, especially in the first 6 months of doing a podcast. And just keep in mind, doing a podcast is a marathon run. It's not a sprint. And it's unusual that a show will achieve extremely high listener numbers quickly. So you need to be patient, and you need to focus on the quality of content that you're producing and the value that you're driving to people that are listening to you. And that will be the keys to long-term success.
Well, that's great marketing, and it applies to podcasting and to everything else. You're absolutely right. We're talking with Rob Greenlee. Rob, if people want to reach you and your company, how do they do it?
Well, I could be reached via email, and you're certainly welcome to send me an email. My email is rob@voxnest.com, and that's VoxNest.com, and that's rob@voxnest. You can certainly go to my personal website, robgreenlee.com, and that's with 2 E's. That has links to all the podcasts that I currently do today. You can also go to VoxNest.com and see the various companies and the podcasting distribution and monetization tools that we have there that you can use if you want to start a podcast. We have lots of, we support live streaming on Spreaker. There's also, like you're using here, is Blog Talk Radio, blogtalkradio.com too. So those are probably the best ways to reach me. I'm also on Twitter too, @Rob Greenlee, and that's with 2 E's. So yeah, those are the best ways to reach me, and feel free to reach out to me. I'm an open book, and I'm accessible as well.
I can second that. A link to his website will be on recalculating.biz tonight, where you can hear this and every other past and future recalculating program, and you can tell us of guests you'd like to hear. Rob, thank you so much for being with us. It's been a great half hour. Thank you.
Yeah, well, All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate having the opportunity to be on your show.
Dan Perkins here from Recalculating.biz with your featured book. I want to tell you about a recent interview I had with Bob Bethel, a turnaround specialist with lots of success in small business. Bob's new book is Strengthen Your Business, Fail-Proof Strategies for Small Business. He tells us of his life successes and failures that have made him and his clients so successful. Over the years, Bob has brought 77 companies back from the brink and changed them into thriving, profitable businesses. His energy is amazing, and at 74, he proves that you can still have a great deal to give others if you just try. His suggestions are easy to understand and very helpful. One insight struck me was that most companies do not have a plan. The old Chinese proverb says, "If you don't know where you're going, then any road will take you there," is true today. Bob Bethel's book, Strengthen Your Business, can be found at Amazon.com or can be ordered at your local bookstore. This has been Dan Perkins with your Recalculating.biz featured book. Dan Perkins here from Recalculating.biz. I want to tell you about Bob Bethel. Bob's new book is Strengthen Your Business, Fail-Proof Strategies for Small Business. His suggestions are easy to understand and very helpful. Bob Bethel's book, Strengthen Your Business, can be found at Amazon.com or can be ordered at your local bookstore. Dan Perkins with your featured book.
Recalculating, a program designed to help you be successful.
My co-host, Dan Perkins, is on assignment, but we're really fortunate today to have Nir Kaldero with us. He's head of Galvanize. He has a fascinating approach to things. Nir, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Don. It's a great pleasure being here.
Well, we're glad to have you. Nir, first, tell us a little bit about your background. You're in San Francisco now, but tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to found Galvanize before we do anything else.
Yeah, so I actually started doing data science a long time ago when I joined the Israeli military service when I was 18. We didn't call it data science or machine learning, but everything we did was pretty much take data and try to figure out how to leverage it in a smart, efficient way to save lives. And very early on, I saw the power behind data, especially the power of data and modeling techniques and what the impact it can make on society. And this is how I started the journey. So I spent some time in the military. I started my bachelor degree in economics, which was very much correlated with what my family is doing in Israel. And then I came to UC Berkeley, started my PhD in econometrics and industrial organization, and then found Galvanize. Galvanize had a very ambitious goal 5 years ago to bridge the gap in all of this technical talent piece around data science, data engineering, and software engineering. And when I joined Galvanize, I joined to architect and create Master of Science in Data Science program, which back then, 5 years ago, was the third in the world. So it was a very novel. Only less than handful universities had master programs in data science with not even dedicated faculty for this kind of like discipline. And it was a very interesting, ambitious goal, and we definitely did it successfully. And now we can look around, and every university in the United States and around the world has a dedicated data science degree and a faculty. So we were kind of like the first one.
Well, that's interesting. Let me see if I can put it in layman's terms for myself and some of our audience. So in effect, you look at large amounts of data to figure out how to do things better. Would that be a short? Okay. I've always been amazed at data, but I've never been able to master it. Your website for people before we go any further?
Yeah, you can. The book website is ds and the letter 4 and then execs.com. And you can find all the information about the book and get a signed copy and find enterprise packages there. And the Galvanize website is simply galvanize.com. And we would love to, have you visit.
Well, can you spell it out for our radio audience?
Sure, absolutely. It's Galvanize.com. Galvanize.com. Like galvanize the word.
Well, lucky you got such a great name for it.
Mm-hmm.
But people like myself sometimes can't spell it right.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway,
That's okay.
Okay. But
That's okay.
now, having said that, and remember our audience is small business, you have a new book out in which you're talking. Tell us a little bit about the book and what is the book's intended to do.
Yeah, so the book called Data Science for Executives. It's basically, we are in the fourth industrial revolution, and I believe that companies, no matter what size they are, they need to figure out how to survive and compete within the competitive landscape that we see today in the industry. So I wrote Data Science for Executives to first and foremost kind of like dispel the myth and confusion surrounding this kind of like game-changing technology. I think many people are bothered by whether artificial intelligence will outperform the human, conquer humanity, and maybe destroy us. So I first of all wanted kind of like to make sure that everyone understands that the technology and artificial intelligence is here to augment our human brain and intelligence, so to enhance us, not necessarily to replace us, or actually not at all to replace us, and also to provide practical strategies for companies of any size to harness its profitable power. So basically understand how you can focus on the data that you already have and try to leverage this data with modeling technique to take your business to the next level and compete in today's climate. So this is why I wrote the Data Science for Executives.
Nir, you've hit a nerve with me, and I'm certainly with our audience. We're all being inundated with all of this data. And most of it, I'll say in my case, I'm sometimes overwhelmed by data. Can you give us some idea of how you can go about sorting this plethora of data we're getting thrown at us every day?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, it's not surprising that you are overwhelmed with the wealth of data. It is because we simply live in a new era of wealth of data where, we try to process and digest millions of data points on a daily basis. And the issue is that, our brain and functionality, the way we remember things, is not actually built to digest and accumulate this vast amount of data. So the only solution and the path moving forward to kind of like digest this data and process it in a very egalitarian way is to rely on a tool, what I call a brain helper. So think about artificial intelligence, think about machine learning as a brain helper. It's a tool that helps you basically digest and process this very vast amount of data. By the way, the average American on a daily basis kind of like try to process around 10 million data points on one single day, which equal to, roughly reading 350 newspapers. So just think about that. And now, let alone that we don't have the time to read 350 newspapers a day. Even if we read them, we will not be able to remember them or process them in a very, egalitarian way. So the conclusions and the decisions that we will make will be very biased. So we need to rely on this technology. We need to rely on this kind of like brain helper, like AI, on this tool that will basically take these 10 million data points and will shrink it to a much smaller subset, let's say 6 or 7 optimized options that we, the human, will actually act upon them based on our experience, even gut feeling, based on our knowledge. That's the only way and the path moving forward to deal with the vast amount of data within this era.
Well, you're sitting there, I'm listening to you, and I'm saying, 10 million pieces of information, we're kind of getting overwhelmed with it. One of the things I've learned over life is there's so many ways of doing things differently. If you only had the ability to figure out which is the best course, can you give us an example of how your system or any other system works so that it helps us narrow these choices so we can understand them?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me give you some examples, and I would say that today we hear about it all the time that most innovative companies rely on data science and machine learning and artificial intelligence to drive their business process and enhance the user experience to add value. And obviously we can talk about companies that everyone knows like Amazon and Facebook and UPS and Alibaba, and basically see and kind of like zoom in into how they leverage the data that they have with this modeling technique to perfect their operations within each kind of like department or verticals within the business. So let's talk about Amazon, for example, because I think it's kind of like an interesting, relevant example that will resonate with everyone. So let's think about Amazon warehouse system. So an average warehouse size, let's say like medium size in the United States, has roughly 3 to 5 million packages float in and out on one single business day. So 5 million packages need to float out very seamlessly, so they can be delivered to the customer or the client on time. Now, do you think that an army of 500 people can actually figure out how to organize this warehouse in a very efficient way so 3 to 5 million packages can go in and out seamlessly? Unfortunately, it's impossible, even with an army of 1,000 people. Again, lots of information, lots of conflicted opinions. So we need to rely on this technology. And, let's talk about data science and, machine learning. Basically, the technology takes the data, try to figure out how to create predictions, and try to help, either robots or people that are actually working in this warehouse on how to organize it in a very efficient way so that, 5 million packages will actually go in and out to their destination in a very smart, efficient way. This is kind of like the problems that, artificial intelligence and machine learning is trying to solve, very complex problems that our brain cannot solve, that we need the technology to crunch this amount of, very vast amount of data to actually make predictions and orient us.
That's really interesting. But let me give you an example of a small business and how and ask you how it will work. All of us have to get all of these, assemble these vast numbers of email addresses, and we sit there with them. Like, for instance, I've got almost 1 million email addresses. Is there a way to take data, for instance, and take those 1 million and figure out which are the ones that are most apt to provide the best return if we send to them?
Yeah. So let's talk about your business. So you said you have like around 1 million email addresses, people who basically subscribe to your radio show, and I guess you also have more than just their email address. Maybe you have kind of like data about when they typically listen to your radio show, or how long, what is the duration of their participation, and how long they are tuned to listen to you. So taking all of this data, you can actually try to figure out what message maybe you want to send them, or how to incentivize them to opt in and listen to your show. So for example, like if you have like so many email addresses and you want to send a marketing campaign, leveraging all of this data, you will be able to kind of like classify your audience to different groups. Let's say you have like the younger one, you have the one that are more techy, you have the one that are maybe larger businesses versus small businesses, and each kind of like each group, you should send a very different message, right? To move from a world of like one message fits all to very personalized message. So crunching and leveraging this data, this machine learning data science technique will be able to basically classify your audience into different buckets and different groups. So you eventually can send very curated, tailored message to each one of them to incentivize them to either collaborate with you, listen to your show more, share some message around, your show, or basically help you scale your business. So this is kind of like how this technology help us. It can, in this specific example, I just talked about classification, which is example of basically try to take vast amount of data and classify to different groups. So each group we provide different treatment, but it can be obviously more than that. For example, we can talk about recommendation engines. So that, for example, your small business audience, after you classify them already in the first step, we love, to hear specific speaker or specific show, or they tune in or a specific time. So you will be able to invite speakers at this specific time that will basically resonate and, your audience will like to hear. So there's a lot of things you can do actually with the data that can give you insights about who are the audience that you interact with, what are their preferences, how can you serve them better, what messages you should broadcast to them, how to incentivize them to listen more, and what content you maybe should, invite to your show and create to better engage with them.
Well, let me give you one more example, which just came across my computer. I'm a brick and mortar store, and I also have an online website. Are there ways of combining the two so you can learn how you can better use your brick and mortar to drive your online and vice versa?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's all about the data, and I think your website is possibly a channel for you to get and aggregate more data, right? For example, just looking at clicks on the website, you understand what people are clicking on, how many times they click on specific show, how many times they tapped into your newsletter. You can send them online surveys through the website. You can figure out a lot of actually engagement from what we call click type of data from the website, and then try to leverage that to figure out how to scale the business and learn more about your audience. That's definitely possible. Maybe, if you if you see a lot of traffic on the website, and if you see that people are actually listening to all of these shows, online at their spare time, maybe operationally you will decide to, change things. Maybe you just want to sit at your home, right, and just record videos, not even live, and just put them on a, repository on your website, and this will be the best engagement that you can get with your audience. So there's a lot of things you can learn from click data. There is a lot of ways that you can get new data from the website, incentivize people to send you information, obviously if they want, in a very smart, sophisticated way that will help your business go to the next level.
You're giving us, we're talking with an extraordinary Nir Kaldero. His website is Galvanize. Nir, your book, and the name of your book, and how people can get it?
Yeah, you can get it on Amazon or on the book website if you want a signed copy. And the website is DS, the letter 4, and then execs.com, or in any other major bookstore in the United States.
But what's the name of the book, Nir?
The name of the book is Data Science for Executives.
Well, it certainly tells you what the book's about. But Nir, we have about 3 or 4 minutes left. What are the 2 or 3 things you would say? And again, our audience is small business. that they should start thinking about in terms of using data?
Yeah, so we are the fourth industrial revolution. I think companies need to figure out how to survive. I think every business needs to understand and acknowledge the fact that artificial intelligence is no longer a future fantasy or computer science chapter in a textbook, and it's time for everyone to understand how to enable, how to deploy, understand the space of AI so we can actually solve the most crucial problems in our era and time, whether it's in our business, economy, society, or even environment. And I want everyone to know that no matter your business size, AI and data science is a top-down initiative. More than the funding needed for this initiative, leaders of all company size need to figure out how to anchor a new culture change, and they need to figure out the talent piece, the technology piece, and the change management piece, and that is required to operationalize these projects to fully realize its ROI. So no matter if you are a 5-people startup or 500 people company, or even if you are Amazon, Facebook, or Google, data science and machine learning is a top-down initiative, and it would require your full participation to really transform your business and make sure that this initiative really thrives and help you get to the next level and compete within this competitive landscape of the fourth industrial revolution.
Well, we're talking with Nir Kaldero, his new book. Again, the title, which I love, Nir, for your new book?
It's Data Science for Executives.
Okay, and your website, Galvanize.com, can you spell it out for our audience?
Yeah, the website is GALVANIZE.com, and the book website is DS, the letter 4, and then execs, EXECS.com.
But then there, I'm going to ask you one more question before. We hear this word, this thing, AI. Well, how do you define it, and where do you see it going in the future?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, again, the way I think about AI, I think it as a brain helper. We are in an era of human plus machine, not just the human or just the machine. And the technology is here to extend our intelligence, not to replace us or take our job or even outperform us. We have a cognitive overflow issue, so we do need to rely on this, brain helper type of technology. AI in general and data science and machine learning helps a lot. Today, when we talk about innovation, we can look at companies, again, large one that everyone knows is like the Amazon, the Facebook, the Google one, and we can all see how they leverage data to enhance their business. But the future of business innovation, we say that has an artificial intelligence component in its very core structure of the business or the product. And I want to give you some examples of products that will maybe spark your brain to think about how you can take the products and solutions and services that you provide to your clients or to users and inject kind of like AI mindset and DNA into them. So we can look at, product like Amazon Echo or Nest or even Spotify. So these companies that are doing great stuff leveraging the data, whether it's like speech recognition or recommendation engine. Robotic is gonna go very big. Healthcare is probably gonna be one of the industries that benefit the most from AI. Especially think about materialistic science. Think about quantum computing. Help us tailor drugs to people based on their preferences, based on their allergies, based on their histories and medical record. So we're moving to a world of personalization. We're moving to a world where all of our businesses and solutions and products has this artificial intelligence component in the very center and core structure of their business.
Wow. Oh, we're talking with
It
Nir
is powerful.
Kaldero. It is. I should have asked this question earlier, but unfortunately we've run out of time. Nir Kaldero, who's got a fascinating new book and who's a fascinating speaker. Thank you so much for joining us. A link to your website will be on recalculating.biz tonight, where you can hear this and every other past and future Recalculating program. And you can also tell us guests you'd like to hear. Nir, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Don. It was a great pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you for.
Tell me, Dan. Tell me about your latest book.
My current book that's coming out, I should say, is Why Can't Grammy Remember Me? And it's really the first book written for children between the ages of 9 and 12 and their families, dealing with dementia. Dementia is a growing problem with the elderly in the United States and around the world, and we are not very well informed about what's going on, what's happening. So I wrote this book in the form of a mystery. And I have two little girls, 9 and 12, who have a magical power to seem to be able to find things that are lost. And so they go to their dads and moms and they say, we work all over the neighborhood helping people find things, and we seem to find things. And their dad says, yes, you have a magical talent to do that. And they said, we'd like to start a business to see if we can help other people. So they decided to start a business. The two girls' names are Hudson and Charlotte. And they start H&C's Lost and Found. If you've lost it, we find it. And so they build a business, and they convince the dads to build them an office and a treehouse in the backyard. And they get busy making posters and flyers trying to get customers. And their dads take them downtown, and they put them in the windows and on the telephone poles and light poles. And they go home, and first week goes by, and nobody comes. And the second week and third week, and nobody comes. They're really, really dejected. And the fourth week comes, and there's a knock at the door. And they walk over and open the door, and there's a young man standing there with one of their flyers in his hands. And he says to them, my dad says the reason why my Grammy can't remember me is because she's lost her memory. And your flyer says you find things that are lost. Can you find my Grammy's memory? Well, they don't know anything about memory. So they take his name and they go see their dads to see what can happen. And the story evolves into how they learn about what dementia is and what's going on in the body when somebody has dementia. And then they decide, while they can't find their customer's memory, they can help him build the tools to retain her in his memory. And so at the end of the book, there are about 10 to 12, 13 things that families can do together to work on to preserve the memory of Grandma and Grandpa, so the generations can know who these people were. And that's the story.
What a great book. When will it be available, and how can people get it?
Well, it'll be available on Amazon.com. A lot of people who have read it, who've had moms and dads that have been stricken with Alzheimer's or dementia, tell me that they really now begin to understand what's happening in Grandma's brain. And we took a different approach. Rather than do the typical brain cross-section, I work with the artist, and we design highways in the brain. And there's a brain of one of the little girls and the brain of Grammy. They both have highways, roads, but the girl's brain, everything is green and go. Grammy's brain is full of no left turns, do not enter, stop, no right turns. So all of the messages that need to come from our brain get screwed up, and we can't function. Great illustrations, though. Wonderful illustrations.
Well, say goodbye, Dan.
All right.
Time for us to go.
Thank you for joining us. And by the way, if you didn't hear all of today's show, you can go to recalculating.biz, and you can pick up this show and past shows to expand your knowledge as becoming more successful entrepreneurs. Thank you for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for joining us on Recalculating. We hope the information you received on today's episode was helpful to you in starting and growing your business. Please go to our website, recalculating.biz, to contact us, to listen to past shows, and see special offers. Until next time, remember, if you grow, we grow. Join us next week for more helpful ideas to make your business a great success. Recalculating, a program designed to help you be successful.